So now you've watched the video on the Hawthorne studies. The Hawthorne studies have always just proved very fascinating to me, especially when we're looking at group behavior. We know that a worker's behavior and sentiments are closely related, and the important norms of influencing the worker really grew out of the series of these studies that were undertaken by the Western Electric Company's Hawthorne Works. It was in Chicago from 1924 to 1932. And I know the video that I showed you was an older video, but to me it just does probably the best example of explaining what the studies were and how they came to be. So again, we know that there are general conclusions, and these studies were overseen by Harvard professor Elton Mayo, and they concluded again that a worker's behavior and sentiments are closely related. Also, from this, that group influences were significant in affecting an individual's behavior. So when you felt like you're part of the group and you had that status of it, then it really affected your individual behavior. Group standards were highly effective in establishing individual worker output. And interestingly enough, money was less a factor in determining worker output than were group standards, sentiments, and security. There were also the experiential components to it. There were 3 major experiments accomplished during that time. The illumination, looking at the light levels that were adjusted to determine the most efficient lighting levels. The experiment failed because the workers reacted more strongly to the increased attention that they were receiving than they did the increased or decreased light levels. So the people were more interested in just the attention that they were getting, and they felt like they were special, that they were set apart, and the light really didn't affect them whatsoever. And then the assembly room test, by defining one group of workers as special and having researchers pay particular attention to the group's work, their productivity increased dramatically compared to the control group. So that was the first time again that we had really studied group behavior. And then the bank wiring observation room. That was a study to ascertain the effects of a sophisticated wage incentive plan. And the result was that the group norms, especially in terms of acceptable work output, were stronger than any wage incentive plan. And the group determined acceptable work output and enforced acceptable behaviors that led to that output. So again, it's just really interesting to me when we look at the Hawthorne studies and how that really just out of an accident came to be. Now, let's look at conformity and Asch studies, and I'll lecture on this for a little while, and then I want to just show you, it's a silly little video, but it really will get the point across about what the Asch studies were in conformity. And so we know that an individual often change their behavior or opinion to one that's acceptable to the group, even if that individual believes the group opinion is wrong. And I will tell you that while conformity is less strong now than it was 50 years ago, it does still seem to exist. And it's stronger in collectivistic type of cultures than it is in individualistic cultures. So in the United States, we don't really have as much of a pressure to conform, but say in high collectivism type of countries, Japan is one of them, then there really is the need to conform. And so the reference groups, these are the groups which are characterized as the ones in which a person is aware of other members. They define himself or herself as a member or would like to be a member. And so they will really have high conformance pressures on its members. So if you really want to be a part of that, then you have to conform to be part of it. So the Asch studies, it's a set of classic studies. It was by Solomon Asch. It affects of conformity. It's where it showed conformity and they were demonstrated. And so what happens is when the subjects of the experiment were shown lines of unequal length in the presence of a group who claimed that the lines were equal, in the length, 75% of the subjects gave at least one answer that conformed, even though they knew it was wrong. So people still feel the need to conform. So I'm going to stop the lecture here, and then I'm going to let you watch just this. It's, again, a silly little video on the Asch studies, and it's an older one, and I think it's a British or video, but I just want you to see what the Asch study looks like if it was done in a setting.